this guy Blakely. Are there any Blakeleys here? Good. One of our founding fathers was the great grandfather of Ellen Osborne, who's the local DAR chair and Shakespeare Club president. Her great grandfather was basically run out of town by that man. In the early days, the land use laws were kind of hinky. If you weren't mining, they could take your land. So he was a farmer. He was here like before the gold rush, and this was like a destination spot. It's kind of confusing because there's her grandfather was Johnson, and so we had a Johnson Ranch, which is now where Camino Golf Course is. There's also a Johnson Ranch over in Placer County that was also a destination for immigrants, probably a bigger one. But ours was a destination, and we also hosted a few fake Indian wars there, which we used as an excuse to kill some Indians. But anyway, Johnson got run out of town by Blakely, who was a conniving bastard from everything I can tell. There's a wonderful book on it. I meant to bring a copy and show it to you, but it's a lovely and comfortable Something Lost by Ellen Osborne, who is a local historian and a wonderful writer. And she tells a great story of local history and of her grandfather's travails. He was run out of town. He ended up going to Arizona and was killed by Apaches within 2 weeks. So that's it. Now, you walk into the cemetery, what do you got? You got, first off, cemetery history. Union Cemetery. What's the Union? It's 4 fraternal orders. Okay? The Masons are here. The Druids are here. The Oddfellows are coming up on the left. And beyond the Oddfellows is the 4th original fraternal, the Redmen. A truly awful group that were fake Indians. And you Native Americans were not allowed, of course, but they had all their bylaws and everything were written in this hackneyed, wampum must be paid every 3 moons, and that kind of thing. It's absolutely embarrassing to read. But they were a huge deal in the day, and so they were here. Now, the Masons were the most dominant force here, and they actually had a presence until the 1950s, when the state forced them to bail. If you want to continue to have your Mason Lodge, you will stop dumping money into old cemeteries, was the order, or something along those lines. And that's when that guy, the old guy in the corner, Joel took responsibility in the 1960s from the Masons and maintained this place for 30 years. Tried to retire a couple times. It went to snot. He moved back and took it over, formed nonprofits, did the stuff over and over again, and we'll see his handprint all over this place in a very good way. He's an inspiration of mine and a hero of mine. The Druids stole the history of the actual Druids from the Middle Ages in Europe, and then they kind of brought all that forward and then claimed to be, and still do claim to be, just a charitable organization, depending on who you talk to. Some of them say they're just a drinking club.
Because there's that monument down there.
Yeah, and that's a monument to this guy. This is the founding Druid on the West Coast, and there's a great story. He was a Druid in St. Louis. He came out here, and he got special permission from the main office, the main National Druid office, to open up a chapter here if he could find 7 members. And he basically dragged 6 guys off the street, and they went into the Oddfellows Hall and formed the first Druid chapter on the West Coast. So the Druids make a pilgrimage here every year. I've joined them a couple times. They're a fun bunch. Like all the fraternals, they're aging out and just trying to maintain some sort of relevance. But they polish this up. What I love about this marker is there's the layers and layers of symbolism. The Druids were really good at symbols. You've got the hook, the staff, the acorn, the altar, the all-seeing eye, I should remember what that means, and the holly. So all that stuff has very specific meanings. And the Grand Arch. Anyway, the head guy in the Druids is called the Grand Arch. And that was him.
Druid. Archdruid.
Archdruid. Yeah. Thank you. They say they've reformed in Placerville. They have, I think, 1 member, maybe 2. And those guys were Druids from like 50 years ago, so they're quite elderly and they're a lot of fun. But they're not holding any meetings. They're not active. in any way, sadly. But, you know, none of the fraternals, when I stand up here and do this and do everything I do, and nobody's asking me to be a member of their fraternal order, so I don't know how hard they're really trying to sustain themselves, or maybe it's just me. Who am I to say? But they do have some beautiful markers, and when this place was at its low point, they were still coming out here, and this area here would be gorgeous, and the rest of it would be overgrown and a disaster. But the Druid plot would be well maintained because they came out, you know, permission or no, and brought their weed whippers and hedge trimmers and did all this. Now, before I get too carried away on this segregation, there was a lot of cross-pollination. For one thing, the head guys were typically in a whole bunch of fraternal orders, not just one. And there's organizations that I've never even heard of, you've never heard of, and some of them were mock, so they'd just be drinking organizations that were just making fun of all the real fraternal orders, and so, but the Druids were real, and yeah, that's all I got on Druids. We can see a couple other things here. One of the projects that, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the curbs, see, these were cart paths. That's what was called a cart path. And so the cart that carried the coffin would go up here, down here. Now, what happened in the 1970s was our buddy Joel there got control of this place in the 60s, and he realized it's almost full. I'm not really comfortable selling these plots. Every time we dig a hole, we're finding stuff we don't want to find. So one of the things that old cemeteries were doing in that time was getting dispensation from the state to sell plots in the walkways, thereby making it very difficult for those of us that followed them to do tours in these walkways because nobody wants to walk on the graves. So I will tell you now, it's okay to walk on the graves. Do it with love in your heart. They understand. They're not complaining, and nor should we. We really didn't have an option. The footing is bad enough. This time of year, it's actually pretty good. Once it gets overgrown a little bit and the ground squirrels get some momentum, it gets worse. You can see that the county has funded all these dirt patches with the brown stuff. That's where the county has actually funded filling in some of the gaps. So these depressions, collapsed coffins, monumental squirrel underground caverns, well, all this stuff collapsed, and so we got this very irregular terrain that makes it very difficult to walk on the turf. And so we're starting to do something about that. Thank you, Julianne. That's her over there ignoring me.
When you say the Druid section, would it be this little
No,
cement
everything
part?
from the road this way up to the mausoleum there, okay?
No, there's a mason.
Yeah, there's a lot of cross-pollination. It wasn't pure. But in the beginning, in 1871, when all this started, the Druids managed this as their own cemetery. And, you know, you bought a plot from a Druid, and if you wanted to be over there, you bought a plot from a Mason, and they did the record keeping, hopefully. It was all just lodge members. It's one of the many reasons that our records stink, because these things are handwritten by, you know, a different guy every 6 months. And anyway, so we got these curbs defining these walkways. The curbs have all shifted. There's been a lot of drainage problems. Machinery to dig the graves in the walkways has banged on them. They're crumbling. They're no longer stable. So what you have here is a county-operated cemetery, and I hope Julianne's not listening now, because I'm going to say that the county, actually, I hope she is listening, they do a good job of basic maintenance most of the time when their union is cooperating. But they're not in the business of planting or fixing, other than public safety concerns. If there's a branch that's dangling that might fall on somebody's head, somebody that might sue the county, then they take care of the branch, okay? But, and this situation is actually improving. Since we started doing Save the Graves, and people like me and other kooks have just come out here with chainsaws and started taking care of some of this stuff ourselves, they've gotten better about it. But the county currently manages 17 cemeteries. 17. They're selling plots in like 8 of them. So they're in the cemetery business. They probably sell, 50 plots total in a good year. It probably costs the taxpayers a little bit of money every time they sell one. So they're not fixing stuff right now, but they're also working with us, and we do fix stuff. This cemetery was locked up briefly by the state in 2005 because nobody would take care of it. Eventually the county stepped up and did that, which was great. But meanwhile, the rose planting that she talked about on the plots in Sacramento was really taking off, and they were worried that our roses would get bulldozed, so they climbed the fence and clippings of our heritage roses, and Joel caught them, and they had a big confrontation, and they were just like trying to keep the roses, I talked to him about it the other day. He's still angry. One of the 16 headstone repairs we did last year was to fix Peter. We put him back up, and his brother John was the money guy locally. He was involved in all kinds of stuff and was fairly prominent in the day, and he wanted to see his brother, his older brother, actually taken care of, and so that's one of the ones that we're proud of. Now you heard Lynn mention that they had to designate some of the projects that they did as, they had to give them special designation and then had to try to legitimize that designation. So before we set out to do headstone repairs, what we did was designate some of these broken markers as quote-unquote threatened. And what that means is that it's laying on the ground, it's old, it's light. Somebody who really wants to steal this thing can pick it up, or maybe them and their buddy pick it up and throw it in the back of their pickup truck and drive away with it and make it a decorative item in their garden. And you know that lots and lots of headstone or headstone fragments, that has been the fate of them. And so all the ones we did, we deemed as threatened. They were easy, they were close to the road, they were broken, they were light enough to get in the car. Lots of symbols in these cemeteries. So lots of symbols on the headstones. This one right here is full of them. This pillar right here. But one of the symbols is a tree. And so there's certain trees that are emblematic of cemeteries, especially gold rush cemeteries, and that's Italian cypress trees. So that's what you see right there, is an Italian cypress tree. If you go over to El Dorado Cemetery, they're twice as tall. So they were an ornamental plant that was, you find them in other situations, but they are definitely significant to cemeteries. They were planted here. They're a very Victorian thing. There's a plant right there. So I'd like to introduce you to our cholera doctor. When we did the 16 repairs, we missed Dr. Kunkel. He actually he nursed the miners through the cholera epidemic here in Placerville, and for that he gets to lay on the ground. He actually wrote a book because France had really bad problems with cholera, and he ended up there and he wrote a book about cholera and what you can do with it, which hint hint ain't much once you got it, and he wrote it in French. He has been a character in Save the Graves in the past, and I'm not even sure he belongs right there, but that's where he's at. But he's definitely threatened. You can see how, these older, this is marble. So there's basically two types of stone out here. You got granite and you got marble. The marble is not as strong as the granite. And there's a couple different sources of marble. If we have time, we'll talk about that. Some of it was harvested locally in the county at a place called Indian Diggins, which is a good story. And there's an amazing cemetery out there. And I think Save the Graves needs to do a little tour, driving tour out there. But the marble's weaker and softer and older. The granite got popular late in the 1800s. Basically, in places like El Dorado County, everything changes when the railroad comes through. So once the railroad comes through, and it was supposed to come through here, but that's another long story. It doesn't. It goes through Auburn. But still, it means that goods can go coast to coast now. So our economy actually blooms because agriculture's taken off, and now we've got an international market. Things like heavy granite headstones from Vermont can be imported in mass, in bulk. So the railroad just is a game changer at many levels. So basically, all these names on these prominent headstones here, you don't get to be here if you're not somebody in this era. So I wasn't going to sit down and do a straight through reading of cemetery history, but this thing forms not during the gold rush. It forms after that in 1871. And basically the fraternals create this thing because they're disgusted with the conditions in the other local cemeteries and they want their people to be buried someplace nicer. And so that's what this is, someplace nicer. Prominent people are here. There may be some pauper graves scattered around, but yeah, they don't have markers that look like this. So next thing I'm going to talk about is one of the research problems we have. This guy here is quite a character, Frederick Adams. And this is it's also an example of a piece of DIY interpretation. So this is me writing something in Microsoft Word and sending it to the local print shop and getting an inexpensive chloroplast thing and building a wooden stand to commemorate the probably fake history of Frederick Adams. If you believe what's on the internet about this guy, he fought in 4 different Indian wars and discovered gold by the age of 16. And I'm not exaggerating. He had he had several horses shot out from under him while he was a mail carrier. This is all in the South. It's in Texas. It's in Arizona. We've got a lot of Apache Indians down there in this area that are very angry. This is right before the gold rush. Also, he fought the Mexicans. And the only reason he got involved so early, allegedly, is that he grew up around in St. Louis around several relocated tribes. So he spoke, he hung out with Indian kids and could speak their language. He was a bright guy. His dad's a big shot lawyer. So he's got some exposure to the law and he's got some exposure to languages. Suddenly, the Army is talking his dad into letting them take him out onto the battlefield to translate so they can negotiate with these Indians and trick them into going where they want them to go. That whole chapter of our treatment of the Native Americans is just hideous. But so he does that. He gets sucked into all these conflicts. He gets wounded. He escapes from the control of his father because he's still a minor and keeps enlisting in these militias. And he's in battle. And without being a researcher and without going to Texas or wherever there might be archives of all these militias, which is way beyond what my OCD and ADD allows me to do, I can't validate this, but it's too good a damn story to not tell. He gets here, he discovers gold on the first day in Clarksville, Melinda. Squaw Creek up there, above there, makes a bunch of dough. He's here for a while.
I would look at, you can have that, but have some doubt in your message. I mean, I don't like fake history. I'm really an
I don't either. I take it down about once a year and then put it back up before an event because I just love talking about this guy.
And again, I mean, this is you could put some disclaimer on it, but until you do the research, and the military records are mostly online, so.
Of the militias, the short-lived militias that fought?
Quite a few of them are. Like you can find the guy.
If only I knew a great researcher. Melinda, by the way, is a historian and an archaeologist and a great researcher. I'm just messing with her. So yeah, you're out of here. You're done.
I was saying, what people like to, what they like to report on, and sold papers.
All right, go ahead then. Take the wind out of my sails. One of the things that Julianne used to spend a lot of her time doing over at the county, it was talking to people on their cell phone who were standing in the cemetery saying, "Tell me again where Uncle Joe is?" And there was no section markers anywhere. So one of our first significant projects was this. We did about 100 of these and probably about 80 signs. You see some of the signs in the middle of the sections. And we probably need that many more. I mean, this took weeks to deploy. And only through the graces of my friend who happens to be a former tagger in Sacramento, so he was really good with spray paint. And who knew taggers all have their own labels now? And so this was actually an adhesive mask created on a cricket, and in our spare bedroom. And then Mark would come out here and he could deal with all that so that they didn't drip and all that. So.
And we bless you every time we have to come out here and mark a plot.
Yeah.
It is so much easier now.
But another one of the projects that I would love to get to, and we at the last Save the Graves, we had people vote on projects, but without really explaining them. I mean, if you just look at 2 sentences about one, it's hard to really know what it means. But for people that are trying to find a specific plot inside of section 21A, 15 through 29, I mean, the way these fraternals, they wind around, I mean, and there's not that much uniformity. You guys understand it. I've never been able to understand it. I just go and start at one end and look to the other, and then half the time I have to come back, and depending on which way the sun is, you can't see it, and it's just difficult. Is H.S. Morey, one of the really fascinating local characters that seems to have gotten lost, despite the fact that his mansion is standing right over the freeway and the Shell station in downtown, and the Shell station is where his foundry was. So the foundry, talk about the fabric of the society, the foundry is like the fabric of the industry. All the mining, the railroads, they had big metal things that had to be made and forged, and that was Morey. Not only that, but he's an incredibly significant guy in local history. I alluded to us losing the railroad before. That's a much longer and great story that I'll be telling actually at 9:30 tomorrow morning at Church of Our Savior on Coloma Street. A little commercial pitch there. But the Morey gets the railroad here finally. 20, 30 years later, after we sold bonds to get it here and then defaulted on them. And the city of Placerville ceases to exist for 28 years, spoiler alert, because we couldn't pay back the bonds. Morey renegotiates the bonds, gets the city back, gets the railroad here, and more importantly perhaps, forms the Philharmonic Society. It's an incredibly musical family. They are involved in so much musical stuff, and yeah, really interesting character. So a great couple, Tom, I can't remember her name. They have owned the Morey Mansion for many years. It's an inn. The guy before them that had it back in the 70s was Scottish, and so he named it the Glen Morey Bed and Breakfast, which they kept that name. And this, you got to just drive on this tiny little road, and you wind up, and there's this haunted house on the hill, and it's the Morey Mansion. And they do well, and they're actors. Both of the owners are actors. And so last year, we did Morey as one of our characters that Saved the Graves, and we got the guy that owns his mansion to do the acting. How cool is that? And he's got a great living descendant named Heather Burnett, who currently operates the Fountain Tallman Museum in downtown Placerville. Yes.
Thank you. Are you leaving?
Come on, take a load up.
We'll let you all go ahead.
All right, you come down into this nice patio area. What's the first thing you see? Anybody, anything.
Mausoleum.
What do you say?
Mausoleum.
Mausoleum. First thing I see is leaves.
A lot of leaves.
Why is that? It's because it's no one's job to pick them up. Okay? We're lucky to get the trash picked up. And we've gotten trees cut down, tree branches that have fallen, removed lately, which is nice. But even that's going to struggle at times. The county does a good job at maintenance, but keeping up with the little bits of maintenance, like there's nobody walking around here picking up faded silk flowers and garbage. It's us. It's people that love the cemetery that do that. This mausoleum was put up by Joel's successor, a gentleman named Ed Ball, and it's got. We're now in like the 80s, I believe, maybe the early 90s. It's got some really prominent people people here. This was all the rage in this era, these above ground mausoleums. Robert West was like the head mason in the state, and big mover and shaker in the formation of Marshall's Foundation, Cold Springs Golf Course, and a bunch of other really good stuff. And here's Carl Borelli. You heard Patty, our designated cheerleader. She'll go in here with Carl when it's her time, and that's a son of theirs that died in there already. So old timers here can just like tell you a story from one end of this thing to the other. They know all these people because these were all the prominent people that wanted to see this cemetery kept alive, and they were running out of plots. They needed something to sell to generate some cash flow, so you put up one of these things and you sell these things. So Julianne, what does one of these cost? Single.
2,750.
$2,799. This week only. These are singles. These are doubles. End to end, right?
Yeah.
And these are what's called niches for cremains. So you don't want to keep grandma's ashes in the attic forever. Put them in a nice, respectable place like this. This is the future for cemeteries like this. This and other crazy ideas that Ed Bixby has. Benches, permanent benches, not things off of Mike's deck. That have niches built into them, and different beautiful ways to have niches in a desirable area that is maintained. So there you go. The fraternals were a big deal. There wasn't the internet. They're like the fabric of society. Prominent people would be involved in multiple of them. A lot of them were strictly white men, but there'd be the female counterpart. So the Masons had the Orders of the Eastern Star. They had their own symbology and history and a whole big deal. The Odd Fellows had the Rebecca, and these organizations are still active. In some areas, they're very active. Anyway, the delineation between the Masons and the Odd Fellows starts at this little service road that goes up to those mausoleums. So we're going to come back around that way. But over here, Odd Fellows. And of all the...
I think they're a little further down. Aren't they?
no, they start here, but they go way down there where those dogs are.
Yeah.
And after that, it's the Redmen. This is the Native Sons of the Golden West, one of the more recent areas of the cemetery, and it's significant. By the way, here's some of the dead, ugly irrigation systems here. But significant because there's relatively recent burials in here. So this area sees visitation by elderly people that are visiting their parents or their spouses. And it's absolutely treacherous footing. And you'll see some very familiar names. There's a Veer camp right there. Lots of folks here, not really historic per se, but beautiful in its own way. And of course, everything you see is sliding downhill. So, there's drainage and erosion that happens, and when you put in all these, they're called copings, these section copings on a hillside cemetery, it's a problem. There's no drainage in the bottom of these things, so when a heavy rain, all the water backs up, and eventually the copings go, and you guys are flat, so you don't have this concern. We're going to go right down here and then go up the service road. Here you see our parking lot. Right here. This is it. Okay, so a couple of restoration projects that we've managed to accomplish. Here, this one right here was our test repair. Now, you heard Lynn talk about $35,000 for how many? 5? Lynn, how many? 6. 35,000. We paid Ed. We paid Westwood Hills $1,600 for 16 repairs. So I think we got a good deal. So here's a before and after picture. This is an example of some of the temporary interpretive material that I would like to make permanent. And so you can see why we got it cheaper, right? For $35,000, you don't have bars on the outside. We have bars on the outside. We are not going to try to pretend that this was never broken. It was lying on the ground, and we were lucky that nobody ever stole the pieces. And here's a picture of it before. It's been laying here forever. So we stood it up. There is some glue involved. Very special epoxy is put in here in dots. So, because these old stones, they're like sponges. They wick moisture. If you slather on a thick layer of sealant, put it on there, it'll just break right off within a year because the moisture's got to go up and down. When we had our list of projects during Save the Graves and asked everybody to vote, one of the items was more headstone repairs, and it got the most votes. But I think it's just because people saw this stuff and they could relate to it and they didn't really understand everything else. One of the other ones I'd like some feedback on, and it would be expensive, but it's sort of a no-brainer, is an app on your phone that, you know, you'd scan a QR code that's on an interpretive piece, and you'd get at least this. And if we portrayed the thing and Save the Graves, you'd get a video of the actor being William Nichols. And I mean, some of this stuff is pretty dramatic. I'm going to read this here. William Nichols' short life included the consummate tragedy, the death of his 3-year-old son, Willie T., in 1877. Just 2 years later, William died at 28. His daughter, Beatrice, was born 7 months later. So he's got one in the oven, and he dies. Her fate was equally tragic. At 23, the recently married Beatrice was burning rubbish in her Placerville yard when her clothing caught fire. After 3 weeks of, quote, extreme and almost hopeless suffering, close quote, Beatrice Nichols Summer mercifully died, according to the Mountain Democrat. A rustic monument in the Oddfellows section of Union Cemetery commemorates her tragic death. Her father's and brother's stories are buried deeper in the old cemetery. The lone commemoration of Willie T.'s brief life is on his father's hand-carved monument, which until 2021 lied broken on the ground, father and son separated by thoughtless vandals. So this became our prototype. We reunited the father and the son. I'm proud of that. All right, the other thing I'm pretty pleased with, because it's 2 weeks of my life, is something Melinda's leaning on, and that is these handrails. This is a DIY ADA website place, and with money raised and begged out of the early Save the Graves, I put these handrails here. It was redesigned 3 times after it was started to be installed. The nice thing about this aisleway right here is the main access for a lot of elderly visitation. There's nobody buried in it. Hallelujah! So I would love to see a simple handrail project. Boy Scouts, church groups, anybody that can operate a post hole digger. Simple, short little stretches of handrails. There's got to be gaps because people got to go visit grandma one way or the other. But this would be a great project for somebody. And obviously we need more than just this one area, but this is sort of the prototype. When you look down at these slopes, it just doesn't look like much. But you know, if you're a little bit older, it is much. It's a steep walk up. So let's make it easy on them. One of the things that makes our old cemeteries beautiful is all the upright monuments and the tablets. You know, these big, beautiful ones. Modern burials, more often than not, have a flat marker like this, which greatly simplifies the maintenance because the lawnmowers and stuff can go right over it and don't have to cut around it. The problem is when they're not put in with a proper foundation, a footing, like see, Suzanne here, in 2017, Julianne made them put in a cement foundation around the thing so she stays above ground. When Ed was out here before the 2019 doing a cleanup for us for free, thank you Ed for a whole crew out here for 2 days, schooling us on how to maintain our own cemetery, he discovered multiple markers completely like these that had sunk down, especially down here, completely buried. And he just had a sense of there's probably something here. It starts probing and bang, there it is. So at some point, Julianne, we've got to get some folks trained and certified to do basic, simple, flat marker raising. That dead bush over there is another one of those heritage roses. It's trimmed up real nice, and it's right adjacent to a very historic family, the Zeitz family. That's right there where I'm pointing. The other side of this section 21C sign. And Dorothea Zeiss is a great story. You guys, anybody that's local, know down on Broadway, up on the south side, there's that placard in the wall with a beer keg on it. Anyway, that's the Zeiss Brewery. And so this guy came from Germany, and let's get out of the road. This guy came from Germany, and he establishes this brewery. It's real popular. He has a bunch of kids with his wife, and then, for reasons no one knows to this day, bails, goes back to Germany. She's got like 7 kids, and suddenly a brewery, which she turns into a boarding house. It's successful, it works, and she becomes a popular local figure. The Historical Museum still has the sign that hung above her front door for the boarding house, a much beloved character, and a story of a woman that was abandoned with her children, during rough times, and stuck it out.
What's available? Like, are you interested? I can give you my card, and that'll tell you how to talk.
This marker here is one of my favorites because it's got an angel head. So they're used to, in the East Coast, you get these beautiful old tablet markers with a death head. That's a skull. And that whole has to do with how attitudes towards death shifted. And the Victorians ended up actually taking it much more positive. And so they still, and the death head is just so cool though. So they just swapped out angels for devils. And this is our only one in Union Cemetery, and it's been laying on the ground forever. And so we cleaned it up and stood it up, and here it is. So this is a service road, and thankfully we don't have any burials in here, so we can use it on the tours. These are the Redmen down here. They weren't as big, so I don't even have any Redmen symbols to show you right offhand. But they were here, and then the Knights of Pythias are farther down. There was one that was made of zinc.
Well, these are mostly what group?
These are, well, this is the Oddfellows section of the cemetery.
Okay.
It's not even as simple as saying that they're all Oddfellows are related. Oh, there's Judge Bennett up there, and you can see I've got a little one of my DIY interpretive pieces on him. So the ground squirrels are a real challenge for us. We don't want to just throw poison down the hole because A, they die in the hole and stink up the cemetery, and B, if they don't, they go outside the hole and somebody's dog or cat gets them, and then you've poisoned somebody's dog or cat. So there's really, all we really do is fill their holes about once a year. But man, they love this spot. I have shoveled so much dirt into this spot. I mean, there's just like a balloon down here of all kinds of stuff. There's just areas that they just can't get enough of.
What's wrong with them?
They create, not only do they create craters, but worse still, they create cavities with a small hole, but they're big. So you could walk on the edge of the hole and fall in.
Nobody's fallen in yet.
Yeah, but that's probably because you keep paying people to fill the holes. Thank you very much.
I don't want anybody falling in. I can just imagine that headline. With the brown.
You notice the lack of benches. Would be very nice to have nice places to sit. Fortunately, we do have the copings. One of the solutions is there's at least one red fox living in the cemetery. I bought a $28 wildlife camera on Amazon.com and set it outside one of these big holes, And in 2 nights, got 150 pictures of ground squirrels and 1 picture of the nose of a red fox. I was like, yes! But again, it's not like you can encourage fox habitation because the neighborhood cats will start disappearing. But the one that is really interesting is owl boxes. Many species of larger species of owls actually eat squirrels. So if you could figure out a way to attract them, to get them to live in owl boxes, every time I've built a birdhouse or a bat house, the birds and the bats won't go near it. But maybe somebody else that knows more than me. Yes, little Elmo. Yeah. Lots of notable burials here. Here's a bunch of the Celios right here. And then we've got the Fowsels right down there, just this side of our GAR area. Lynn mentioned the GAR. They were a fraternal order that was formed after the Civil War of former Civil War vets. And surprise, surprise, there was twice as many GAR members as ever people that fought in the Civil War. I think there's a hole in there, probably.
No, it might be good because still Brent was showing a sunken grave down here, and they might have come down this way with a wheelbarrow. That might have been what it is.
Oh, Stella Tracy. This is a good one. She was a major benefactor. She left her entire estate and her house to the Historical Society. And she was a major purveyor of the arts in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And her uncle was Ralston from the Comstock Lode, the guy that made all the money on the Comstock Lode. So she's a niece of Ralston that ends up here, and she marries Henry Numbers Tracy, who was also a character in the most recent Save the Graves. He had the shoe store downtown, back when you used to get just generic shoes. There was no right and left.
Oh.
This was complete. This guy's been laying on the ground forever, and we didn't even know where he went. And our wonderful headstone historians used voodoo or a Ouija board or something and probed and found the base of this guy subterranean by a foot and put Liefeld back up where he belongs.
That's in good shape for that age.
Yeah, it is, and that's a good example of one that it would be great to get the lichen off of, because the lichen is eating that detail. Yeah. Behind there, we've got another repair, Adam Malkier, and the all-seeing eye symbol, which is really one of the more dramatic ones. That one might be a good logo.
Is that like on the back of the dollar bill?
Yeah, yeah. Here we see some early experiments with these section signs. Maggie Akins, she's a historic character. And we also have the Raffettos down there facing the other way. They had the Carey House when it was the Raffles Hotel. That's the Raffetto clan. We have some Wilkinsons here. They're all over the place. The Wilkinson family built half of any place anybody lives around Placerville. This is where I did my early headstone cleaning research, right here. Some of these were sprayed with a biological cleaner and just left. Some were sprayed and brushed with a brush, and I tried to keep track of them all. And bottom line is just what you think. If you spray the cleaner, this is like fairly expensive, very safe, stone-friendly cleaner, and you brush it in good and let it sit and rinse it and spray a little more on, and then come back a week later and do it again. It works best. This one is just spray it on and walk away. But this age of marble seems to be particularly susceptible to the lichen. And we've got markers now that are just no longer legible because we haven't just brushed the lichen off them. Like a lot of the detail on this one here, you can just see. It has, I can never keep it straight, but oak trees are a big contributing factor. When they're under oak trees, the lichen is happy. Thank you. Thank you. We'll talk. We'll talk. See you at the lantern tours.
Oh, yeah. You can come help me, though.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Oh, good.
Love to do that. here we have a couple of repairs, one of which is credited as the founding guy in the cemetery, and that's
John Roy.
John Roy. He-
Ironically, an undertaker.
yeah, what a coincidence. But you can see it was a pretty complex bracket. Without really, when I picked these out, I didn't really think hard about what was involved in the brackets, the fact that the tapered sides and everything were going to complicate matters. But here you can see one that is nice to get up. Now he decided that he didn't like drilling these brackets in, but we've already had one fail. And I think that we're going to need to go back in and anchor the base bracket in. So, yeah, John Roy. So this is the date of the founding of the cemetery. And he was a Mason, and he was definitely instrumental in the formation of the thing. Miraculously. I'm big on interpretation. You know, El Dorado County is all this interesting stuff, but if you don't know a little bit about it, for me at least, that's lost on me. You give me that much information, and I'm like, cool, and I can connect it to other things, and you know, build this network of understanding. Can you look for Roy or Kemp in there, and just leave them here if they are?
John Roy.
Yeah, he goes over
John
here.
Roy.
He needs a little green stand. Great father-son, mother-daughter project. Some more little green stands. Put these things, get them up off the ground. Maybe they'll last a year or two until we can afford metal ones.
Yep, that's on YouTube.
So Joel, after getting permission to bury people in the cart paths, the next thing he did is start building mausoleums. And these above ground burials were real popular. He started at the fountain area we're headed towards, and just every couple of years would add another one. What's this, anybody know what this kind of stone is? I can never remember the name.
Is it a type of marble or travertine?
Travertine. Beautiful travertine shutters. These are called crypt shutters. So these names are all the who's who of the area here. Here's Jack Sweeney's adopted father, Florence. There's Florence's downtown. That's Florence. This guy Gregory, for some reason, probably because he's right across from the primary target zone, primary party zone, has been the target of just repeated vandalism. He's been stood up over and over again. His base was never solid. So we made him, even though he's a little bit big to pick up and put in your trunk, we made him one of our repairs. And Brett came in and poured a new foundation. And I came in and used the biological cleaner, which turned it that brown color. But before that, you couldn't even read it. It looked like that before. So I'm hoping that that brown color fades with time. This biological cleaner is definitely something that works long after you apply it. So hope for the best. We did have a tweaker come in the middle of the night about 10 years ago and smash a bunch of these lower crypt shutters and dig around in there and do all sorts of mayhem. It took forever to get it cleaned up because nobody was paying attention. Really a sad place we'd gotten to. But we're past that now. There's people out here, there's people paying attention, there's people who love the cemetery. It's amazing how much just being out here regularly, you know, just the fact that there's people out here pounding in little stakes or whatever it is, goofy little projects I do, fixing broken fences, that the damage gets reined in quickly. What is that? Sunglasses on Ira Glenn. He's one of the money men. Just going on. A lot of these guys were the lawyers and bankers of the time, and so they're not necessarily big historic figures in the headline sense, but they're behind it all. None more so than this guy John's over here. Actually, we'll look at it from over here. A lot of different qualities of marble, some low. So, you know, when they would make a big marker on a low quality marble, you end up with something like this Van Voorhees marker here, where it's literally just melting. And that actually is Indian Diggins marble. You can tell by the blue veining, distinctive blue veining. So that was harvested here in El Dorado County, way up in the woods, at an early marble mine founded by one of the early headstone carvers named Luce. Before that, all the marble was coming from either Vermont, around the Horn, or from Italy, also around the Horn. So that was a big deal. And there's a beautiful cemetery out there, where you gotta drive on a dirt road for 45 minutes to get to it, about an hour and a half drive from here. And since they had a marble mine there, there's all these huge monuments out there in the middle of the woods. It's really an interesting place. No, it's not Marble Valley. Marble Valley's got some interesting stuff too, though. So this was the fountain area. From the beginning, there was a majestic fountain right here. It was stolen. A 17 torched off and carried away. Never even a police report filed before I was involved. This is original equipment, some sort of poor quality mortar that's fallen apart. Originally, there was a red quartz, I guess that is, cross in each of these.
Oh, I see it.
And then,
And that one is still there.
yeah,
Yeah, those three are this one's been obliterated because there were, these
yeah.
are called shutters. These outer covers here are called shutters. And apparently we had some vandalism here at one time.
Yeah, we had some nasty vandalism here.
You've heard Mike mention Joel Ashworth, who built these. This is his crypt.
Yeah, so every time I come up here and Joel's name is not on that crypt, it's like, yes.
Joel noticed last week that this was now gray granite. He's not happy about it. He talked to me about it this morning.
And
Now
it's
that
just,
it's been pointed out, yeah, it looks terrible now.
Yeah.
well, it's a simple Tetris game to swap out and put the granite ones on the bottom
We could swap this out.
and put the, what's the name of that nice white rock again?
Oh,
Travertine.
Travertine, yeah.
Yeah, the travertines are expensive. And
I
the
don't
rose
think
quartz is
this
even more so.
Yeah, this isn't even available anymore. Or maybe it's that one that's not, that type of rose quartz is not available anymore.
Yeah.
But
But
we
it
could
would be
just
nice to
swap
clean
it.
this up. And so this is this was an original feature area. And you can see attempts to turn it into a veterans place. And interestingly, the acoustics in here, I came in here and there was a guy playing an acoustic guitar one night sitting right there. Oh my God, the sound was just incredible. So hard rock mining in Placerville kind of never really got off the ground for some reason. It was too hard to get as deep as every place else along the Mother Lode went. Granted, it was hard to get deep at all because this is pre-electricity and everything's steam, but they were doing it in Nevada, they were doing it in Nevada, they were doing it in Plymouth, they were doing it in Grass Valley, but we weren't able to do it very well. So there's a bunch of mines that were on the south side of Main Street. They all got consolidated late in the 1800s as the Empire Mine Complex, and this is the guy that ran the whole bloody thing. And so you can see all this beautiful detail in his family's markers. It's really high quality stone. And note that there is some blue veining here, so I'm not sure if that's Indian Diggins or not. If it's Indian Diggins, it's high quality stuff. It's not always that high quality.
So it's halved.
Yeah,
Joined
it's
up to
molded,
the
yeah,
half, so it's
yeah.
cast and then
Yeah.
stuck back together.
We're lucky that this one is still here, because a lot of these get stolen.
Zinky, inexpensive zinc cemetery markers and statuary began appearing in American cemeteries around 1870 and continued into the early 20th century. Cemetery buffs like to call these markers zinkies. Zinkies are cast and sand blasted to create a matte finish which resembles stone. To get the distinctive blue-gray color, the surface was covered with linseed oil and hit with high pressure steam, a process called steam bluing. Victorian markers branded their offering as white bronze and played up the durability as imperishable by nature and ever enduring in beauty, an element of
Modernity.
modernity added to the appeal. The zinc was nearly 100% pure. When left exposed, zinc forms a coating of zinc carbonate, which is rust resistant and does not attract the lichen and moss, which are steadily eating away at the marble counterparts.
Where the veins were harder than the stone. Normally the veins are an intrusion point for moisture in the lower quality Indian Diggins marble, but here the veins are the hard part and the stone is lower quality.
Oh, that's interesting.
We got a plaque we forgot to look at on the gate on the way out. Check it out. It's on the right post facing the street to an early doctor and an early dentist named Rance and Fitch, put there by mid-century, in the 1940s, by their families. So it is a nice gate, and we've gotten it fixed once or twice, but it's too narrow, so it keeps getting bumped and then doesn't close right. We went back and forth with the city about whether or not to try to keep it closed, and the most recent iteration of those discussions is just leave it open, because if they do remember to lock it, they don't remember to unlock it in the morning. So that's it.